Fresh dill is sitting here, and that means we are making dill pickles. Super simple, shelf stable, water bath canning at its finest. We're gonna pack these jars, we're gonna prepare the cucumbers so they stay crisp, make a really simple brine, make sure they have lots of flavors with 2 forms of dill, so it's really right there. Pickles are easy, and now you're gonna love them. So for a dill pickle, you want the classic flavors, and that's what we're working with, but the important thing to do is how you begin and to make sure they retain flavor, crispness, and freshness. So to do that, you have to prepare the cucumbers. And what we're doing right now is we're slicing them. Now, there are different types of cucumbers, obviously. I grow probably 4, sometimes 6 different varieties. And honestly, I do that because there are differences when you're going to make pickles. Now, I'm doing chips for this. You could do spears, you could do whole small pickles if you want. But you can see, look how different varieties are. What I look for in a cucumber is if it's nice and long and slender like this, usually it's perfect. Now we always remove the blossom end because this little bit can have an enzyme that actually makes pickles go soft when they're in a jar for storage. So you remove that, you can eat it, don't worry about that, but you don't want to pickle it. So what we're gonna do is slice them, but you can see with this type of cucumber I have here, see how like the inside has just a nice ratio of small seeds to that really flesh that you want to eat? Sometimes if you're working with a really big pickle that gets too bulbous and round, it will have, you know, a lot of seeds in it, which to me really is not the texture we're going for. So I got that from my mom. She is someone that does not love if it's kind of that mushy inside of a pickle. So instead we always look for, so on certain varieties, I pick them smaller like this because if they get too big, they start getting really bulbous and then they have a lot of that seedy inside. So with all this, you want to now place them in a large container that can fit in your refrigerator. So you can see here I have a lot prepared because we're going to be making about 8 pint jars of pickles. So the thing is, when you're going to this work, when you're actually going to get out your water bath, you're going to make shelf-stable pickles, you might as well do a nice batch, which is about 8 jars. So if you think about it, over the next year, are you going to eat 8 pint jars of pickles? I know I am. And sometimes when you have it, you just for sure do. So the important thing now is to salt them. What this does is it draws out excess moisture, but retains and helps them retain their really crisp texture that you want. That's what you want in a pickle. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take canning salt or pickling salt. The difference is there's no additives, there's no anti-caking agents, there's nothing added to this other than a nice fine salt. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put this all over these cucumbers and we're just gonna mix it up slightly. So mixing this together is just to make sure that salt somewhat gets evenly distributed. Obviously it's going to take a little bit to break down. And this is also going to make sure it adds flavor because this is where we're going to salt these cucumbers too. So it's adding multiple steps here. And remember, a dill pickle has a decent amount of saltiness to it. That's what you need to maintain that flavor, freshness, crispness. So second step in doing this is ice right on top. Now I guess before I put my hands in my ice from my freezer, I should rinse off that salt. So what ice does is again help maintain that crisp texture, and we're still gonna put this in the fridge. So old recipes, and I know some people still do this, they lime their cucumbers. So they put them in a lime solution, and that helps maintain a certain texture, a very crisp texture. The problem is they have found that it's almost impossible, or very next to impossible, to rinse off all the lime that is added. And that makes them kind of unsafe to can. So I don't lime pickles anymore. When we find out things like that, we want to stay safe. So I do the salting and I do this, and we'll talk more about it later. So I'm gonna put this in the fridge, let them sit for a few hours to make sure everything does its work, and then we're gonna make pickles. The cucumbers are about ready, we'll talk about that, but first we wanna get a very simple brine together. In here I have water, super simple, and I'm gonna be putting in now a nice ratio of vinegar. These are a dill, they should be sharp, they should be fresh. So the important thing with vinegar when you're canning, always make sure it's 5% vinegar, meaning 5% acidity. Otherwise, it's not safe. I was actually at the grocery store buying my last jug of vinegar, and I found one right beside the regular. It was a 4%, beside the 5%, by 5%. So what we're gonna do, instead of, we salted, the salt is gonna be on the cucumbers. I'm gonna put this around the stove so it heats up because you pour it on hot. Now, these are to me a dill, which does not have sugar on it. If you want to, you can add sugar. I personally wouldn't to a dill because it's dill. Now, I took off most of the ice. You can see, since it was in the fridge, quite a bit of ice was still on it, honestly, which is good. That's what you want. You want to keep ice on it. If for some reason yours does not stay on it or like melts really quickly, make sure to add more because that's what helps maintain that. And look at all of that moisture that's coming both from the melted ice, but also from the excess moisture that was in these. So I'm gonna pull them out, let them drain. Now you're probably gonna say, wait a minute, why aren't we rinsing these? So this amount of salt that was put on them is the amount needed then to stay on them in order to get that nice salty kick from a dill. If it would have been any more, it would have maybe been too much, but that's why we're doing it this way. And you can see here, I'm just letting them drain enough that as they're sitting, a little bit of that excess moisture can come off, but I'm not worried about it beyond that because it's already done its work. You can see they don't change that much. They have a little bit of difference in them, but not too different. So now, since I'm calling these a fresh pack, that means without cooking these, we're gonna pack them quick and fresh right into jars, which is, to me, kind of the fun part when you get to this point of canning. Sometimes, this is something my mom does, which if you've watched her can with me, we have videos, she does this all the time because it helps pack them down in the jar a little easier so you don't have to get in there and do it. But it's not super important here. We're just gonna make sure they're sitting nicely, fill the jars, and then we're gonna add the flavor needed. All the cucumbers are in and I've already assembled all the other things for most of it. Now what you're gonna see is I brought in my dill. So we're using 2 dills here. We're using some dill seed, which is a dry seed you can get in the spice aisle. And the reason I do that, it just kind of is a control on the dill flavor. We're also using fresh dill, which is a beautiful flavor, but you need to have these heads that have dill. This is where the seed comes from. So once they flower, it turns into a seed and that gives you this beautiful kind of more, let's say it's a floral dill flavor. And I'm packing all the jars with some of that too. Now you can use only these fronds with the seeds if you want, but I find that mixture is really best. And that way, if you happen to not have, because I know you're not always gonna be able to have these, if you happen to not have these, you can still make these pickles. You'll just up the dill seed. That's kind of the beautiful part. Now I am in about half of them putting some smashed or crushed garlic. I think that's just kind of nice. I like it. It's a garlic dill then, and to me that's a beautiful thing. So all we do now, since these are fresh packed, is we fill them up with brine. So I have my brine that was boiling. I just had lowered it and it's nice and steamy still. And we're gonna pour that over all of I'm gonna ladle it obviously with a nice funnel just to keep it as clean as I can. But you can see the important thing is to always leave that 1/2 inch head space that's at the top. To finish these up, it's always make sure to have some hot water and a clean, I use paper towel or cloth. You wanna make sure to wipe the rim. Now there's no sugar in this, so it shouldn't be sticky, but still any brine can inhibit a good seal. So you wanna make sure you do that. And then you take your prepared lid, get out any air bubbles of that jar, put your lid on that's prepared, follow the box or manufacturer instructions, put on your ring. Now I reuse rings. That's where you're gonna see some rust on them because you buy new lids, you don't need to always buy new rings until they're bad. And now these are ready to go into a hot water bath canner that I have going. So this is really the simple process now, what makes them shelf stable. I've had this at a boil. I'm gonna turn it up to make sure it comes back to that full boil as I start putting these in. Now I just always like to have them on a tray so I can carry them with me over to the stove and I don't go back and forth, especially when you're taking them out. But now I'll put them right in. We'll let them sit in there and just kind of cook in that boiling water and then they'll be done. I'm pulling out the last one and you can see it's such a simple process. And I always think that's what I wanna make sure I explain is that canning, as in hot water bath, shelf stable canning, it's not that it's hard. It takes a couple, it's a time maybe taker, but it's an easy process that I know everyone can do. And that's why I wanna take you through all these steps. Now, these are beautiful. What you let them do is you let them sit for at least 12, sometimes up to 24 hours to make sure they seal. Now, the difference is, I couldn't fit these all in my canner at once. So these came out first and you can see all of them now are indented down. So you shouldn't touch them yet, but you can see that they're down. Where these are pulling in, but they still are inverted up because I just took them out. And within, should be minutes here, you'll hear a little ping, so the air is sucked out and they are shelf stable. In 12 hours, 24 hours, I will remove these rings. And I know this always makes people say, what? You don't remove the rings. You do remove the rings. The rings could make a false seal. You always want to remove a ring. You can put it back on if you want, but remove it to check the seal. And also, I reuse my rings time and time again. Always, to me, you can tell a canner that has canned for a long time when they don't have rings on them because you reuse those. So I can't store them or I'll run out. But you want to check that seal to make sure it's good after 12 to 24 hours. If one doesn't seal, don't panic. put it in the fridge, and you can eat it within, I'd probably wait about 2 weeks because you want that flavor to really set in. When you're storing these in a dark room, I put mine in my basement. You can just put them in your pantry too, but let them sit for, like that 2 at least 3-4 weeks before you start eating them. So these are now gonna cool. I will store them when we're done. I will put the date on them, which is good because I just brought one up that I still had from last year. You can see the dill is in it, and they have a beautiful, now I have not had these in the fridge yet. Always, if you're worried that when you bring them out, they're not as crisp as you want, make sure they're chilled before you eat them. These are not, but they still have really good texture and flavor. You get the dill, multi-layers. I did not put garlic, I don't think, in these. They're really good. They just give you that fresh, pungent dill, which is what you want. Use these on hamburgers, on sandwiches, as a side for something. You could also do these with spears if you want to too. Spears of pickles. Cucumbers. Oh, did you hear that? I always like to talk long enough so you at least hear one. That's what you want to hear, and that's what you're going to hear now that you know how to can these super quick, easy, fresh packed dill pickles. Take you through all the process so you can do it too. Share this video around so other people can see canning is not something just that your grandma or a relative used to do. It's something you can do, and it's this easy. Check my website, wyseguy.com, for this full recipe, step-by-step how-to with pictures, and everything else you need to go. And until next time, I hope you like pickles, because you can now make them.